They met midair, and Spider-Man was ready. At least he thought he was ready. He had some ideas about general readiness, and it was all great inside his head. But to be honest with himself, he had no clue what he was doing. The first hint he had was when, as they hurtled toward each other, Blood Spider punched him in the face. Spider-Man rolled with it, minimizing the impact. But it still... What was the word? Hurt. Yes, that was it. It hurt. A lot. This is still the best plan we've got, he reminded himself as pain exploded inside his head. He learned a lot from fighting Echo. He learned about his own style, how he relied on moves and patterns he hadn't even known were in his lexicon. Then, he learned how to force himself to think differently, not like himself. It was shadowboxing, so he had to find a way to trick his shadow. Bingham was an Echo, though. He could do what Spider-Man did, but he never studied his moves. He wanted to be Spider-Man, but he hadn't taken the time to learn how to be Spider-Man. It was time for his first lesson. Even as they plummeted toward the ballroom floor, Bingham squared his shoulders, ready his fists. He wanted not simply to fight, but to brawl. He wanted to punch his enemy in the head, in the torso. He wanted the two of them to square off. Spider-Man decided to give him what he wanted. They landed on their feet, facing each other. The web-slinger's jaw already felt swollen, but he ignored the pain. He raised his fist like a boxer. Blood Spider's head snapped to attention, fully alert. Maybe for the first time, his webs shot out and snagged the real Spider-Man's shoulder. A quick yank pulled the web-slinger forward, off balance. Spider-Man aimed another web toward the ceiling and shot upward, taking his enemy. The man whose existence was an insult. With him, Spider-Man felt a lurch in his stomach, the sudden ripple of being out of control, and calmed his mind to search for an anchor. An instant before he fired off his own webs, Blood Spider released him. He began to plummet downwards. Again, he aimed, but before he could fire, Blood Spider barreled into him like a mid-air football tackle, driving his shoulders into his opponent's stomach. The breath shot out of him, and then he hit the ground hard. His lungs were already on the exhale, and Spider-Man found himself struggling for air. He coughed and almost vomited in his mask. Never a good idea, as he tried to breathe again. All around, people grasped, some fled, others moved closer. Cameras flashed while TV news crews turned their lights on the two masked men. They'll love watching you be destroyed, Blood Spider cried as he struck Spider-Man in the face with a balled fist. Then again, and a third time. You'll talk and you joke and pretend to be a hero, Bingham railed, but you haven't got the guts to follow through. You'll knock your enemies down, and they get back up again. You want the world to play by your rules, but there are no rules. When the Blood Spider knocks you down, you'll stay down. Spider-Man was able to suck air into his lungs, and then pain blinded him as blow after blow landed on him. He reached out to the ground, trying to push himself up, but took another punch, this time to his temple, and stars erupted in his vision. He felt his arms start to go limp. No! This guy has stolen his name, but much more importantly, he killed people. Killed Anika. And now Blood Spider was going to beat him to death. In public. In front of MJ. In front of his aunt. They would take the mask off his body, and Aunt May would learn his secret. The plan, his ridiculous, impossible plan, was all forgotten as he struggled to remain conscious. As he struggled to strike back harder. Yes! He'd hardly been aware of it, but he was standing again. He'd hit back, and hard too. His mind had drifted, but his body had taken over, and that gave him just enough to land a blow. Then another. Then it felt like someone had turned the lights on. Spider-Man hit Bingham again, and then again, and Bingham was staggering backward. He unleashed 2 strands of webbing into Blood Spider's face, and then pulled down, hard, slamming the man's head into the floor. Bingham struggled. Spider-Man released the slack and slammed again. For Anika. For all the victims. He released a 3rd time. And then he saw MJ, across the ballroom, staring, open mouthed. Was she worried that he was hurt? Or that he was going to kill Bingham? Her face. What she saw in him. It was enough to make him stop. But he wasn't there to kill Bingham. No. The web-slinger had a plan. A plan to save people. To protect the city. And to do it the right way. Spider-Man would outfight his enemies if he had to. But he would outthink them when he could. And he would use his powers responsibly. Always using them to save lives. Never taking them. That was the difference between the two of them. That was what it meant to be Spider-Man. He dropped his webs and let Bingham get to his feet. Ready to call it quits? He asked. Oh, we're just getting started. Blood Spider spat back. No, we're finishing up, Spider-Man told him. You took me by surprise before. But that's the only way you could ever hope to beat me. A fair fight? You'll go down every time. No, Bingham hissed. I am the Blood Spider. More like Bloody Nose Spider right now, I'm guessing. With a roar of rage, Bingham rushed toward him, but Spider-Man leapt easily out of the way. It was time to close the deal. The guy wanted to fight? Spider-Man would give it to him. Not just the way he wanted. He kept his distance, moving clockwise, careful to keep Bingham engaged. If you think you can take me fairly, the web-slinger said, then let's go. 1-on-1. No tricks. We can decide, once and for all, who the real Spider-Man is. Yes, Bingham said, his voice rising. Yes! Let's see who's stronger. Let's see which of us is real. Let's see which of us is real. But it's called prize fighting for a reason, Spider-Man said as he circled his opponent. There has to be a prize, right? What do you want? Bingham responded. He sounded confused. What can I give you other than to an end to your miserable life? Tempting, but I think we need something a little more interesting, Spider-Man said. Oh, I know. The thumb drive. If you got it on you, we could fight for that. It seems like a pretty good prize. How's that sound? Bingham put a hand to his hip. Most likely he had an inner pocket there. But it was still kind of cringy. A second later, he pulled out the drive and clutched it in his fist. I'm glad I don't have to touch that without gloves, Spider-Man said. We fight, Blood Spider announced. The winner takes it. The winner, which means you'll never have it. Never! You can't beat me! Dude, I've already beaten you. I just won. That's not your thumb drive. I switched them while we were fighting. Blood Spider paused and looked at the thing in his hand. Somewhere under the mask. Spider-Man was sure Bingham had to be squinting, trying to decide if he remembered what the drive looked like, and attempting to decide if he looked just like this. Could he be sure? Then it was gone. Echo leapt down from one of the balconies. She snatched the drive in Bingham's hand, landed, rolled, and came back up again. Bingham turned to watch, frozen in place. She forgot to say yoink, Spider-Man observed. So, can I say it? Can I say yoink? I love a good yoink moment. Blood Spider spun and charged at him. There are cameras in the room, Echo told herself. People are watching. These images will be all over the news, so don't grin like an idiot. She was a hero now, an ally of Spider-Man. That was something to take seriously. But she couldn't stop herself. She did not want to. She grinned. Echo stepped forward and came face to face with Fisk. His eyes were red and dark and hooded. He didn't even seem to see the drive in her hand. He saw only a betrayal. Her first reaction was shame, but it was quickly followed by indignation, then anger. This was the man who killed her father, who caused her to build her entire life on a lie. Echo was fast, but she wasn't fast enough to dodge an attack she couldn't see coming. His fist shot forward with an impossible ferocity. He was still, and then he was striking her in the face. She couldn't avoid it, so she leaned back and away, avoiding the worst of it. That didn't stop the pain. Being grazed by a speeding truck was better than a full-on hit, but it still hurt. She stumbled backward, and the drive fell from her hand. That seemed to shock Fisk out of his fury. He looked at Echo. He looked at the drive. Pain shot from her face in electric sparks, but she put it away. Compartmentalized it. It was just pain. Maybe a broken jaw, but mostly pain. Right now, she had a second to react. People were watching them. They were likely shouting things, but she couldn't take her attention away from Fisk. If he got hold of the drive, he would be in control again. He would never let himself be vulnerable again either. Echo couldn't let him have it, but to grab it, she would have to take her eyes off her enemy, and Fisk knew it. She would be vulnerable. And if any man alive knew how to exploit a vulnerability, it was Wilson Fisk. If she tried to take it, she would lose it. She knew that with absolute certainty. The look in his eyes said that he knew it too. Checkmate, he said. You betrayed me, and you lost. Information was power. She knew that Spider-Man wanted desperately to know what Fisk had on Osborn. Whatever was on that drive was so explosive that Osborn had been willing to risk control of the city rather than let it go. Spider-Man would try to find another way. She wasn't Spider-Man. Lunging forward, she drove her heel into the drive. She could feel the plastic crack under the shoe. Better it be lost, she thought, than in Fisk's hand. Appending the board, she said with a grin. That sent a new wave of agony rippling across her jaw, but it was worth it. That's the countermove for a checkmate. He lunged for her again, but this time the police were there, holding him back. Fully a half dozen or more. He tried to shake them off, like they were little children, but there were too many. Enough that they could also turn their attention to her. Echo pivoted, saw a ledge, and leapt. Spider-Man circled Bingham, his fists raised. Bingham took an exploratory jab, then another. "We're not done," he said between punches. "We have to fight to see who's stronger. I don't care about the thumb drive. I only care about beating you. About showing the world who is better." "Yeah, but that's your problem," Spider-Man said. "I don't go around trying to prove I'm better than anyone else. The only one I need to convince is myself." He moved left, then right, keeping clear of Bingham's powerful jabs. He needed to end this. A few carefully placed webs might stop this creep, but Bingham was fast. There was a good chance they'd miss and hit a bystander. Spider-Man shot off some strands towards his sparring partner's feet, but, as he feared, the blood spider was just too nimble. "You think we're the same?" Blood Spider snapped. "It's like you read my mind," Spider-Man said. "Do another one." Keep the guy talking. "We're not the same. You're not like me," Bingham spat back, hardly seeming to hear his opponent's words. "You can't beat me in a fight. You're not fast enough to use your webs. You're not smart enough to figure out what I'm going to do next. So what's your plan, huh? Run away? Call it a draw? Then the next time I come back, put a few people in the ground. You'll shrug and say you did what you could." Spider-Man crouched and propelled himself into the air, aiming a devastating kick at Bingham's chest. But the man had already moved. He reached out and tried to grab Spider-Man by the ankle, but thanks to his spider sense, he was already twisting out of the way. "Maybe I'll blow up another restaurant," Bingham said. "Just for fun." "He's trying to mess with my head," Spider-Man thought. "Make me lose focus." And it was working. He felt the fury pumping through him, and it mixed with a heavy dose of frustration. This guy was cruel and violent and arbitrary. He hurt people because it made him feel powerful, and it had to stop. Easier said than done. Bingham was fast, he was strong, and he was agile. All of the things he boasted were true, except the part about him being smarter. That definitely wasn't true. And it was how he was going to end this. Spider-Man moved in for another punch, faking left and jabbing right. Bingham dodged it, just as he would have. Just like he predicted. Instead of putting his energy and focus on the jab, Spider-Man instead concentrated on the sweeping kick that hooked around from behind, knocking Blood Spider to his knees. "That's how it's done," Spider-Man thought. He shot out another barrage of webs, trying to keep Bingham on the ground. But even off his balance, Blood Spider was too fast. He crabbed backward and side to side, eluding blast after blast. Then, he was on his feet and charging forward. Bingham was furious. Spider-Man might be struggling to control his emotions, but Bingham didn't even bother to try. He was all rage, and he was moving like a freight train. Spider-Man held his ground, and then spiraled out of the way at the last moment. As he did, he unleashed another barrage of webs at Bingham's feet. One caught the man by the ankle, and Bingham went down. Hard. He face-planted, and a voice in the back of Spider-Man's head chimed in with the hope that someone had caught in on video for later. If he survived, because that wasn't a guarantee. Bingham pushed himself up like an acrobat and yanked free of the webbing. "All those people are dead because of you!" he shouted. "He's just talking," Spider-Man told himself. "There's no logic to it. He's just trying to get under my skin." Bingham swung and missed. The web slinger saw an opportunity, but didn't take it. He'd likely miss if he made another attempt to connect. He wasn't going to play by Bingham's rule. He was going to make the rules for the both of them. And then Spider-Man would find his moment. "They laughed at me because of you!" Blood Spider snapped. He came in hard with another punch. Spider-Man ducked under it, just barely. And a good thing, too. It was strong enough to take his head off his neck. "My mother ignored me because of you!" Bingham cried out. And he tried to connect again. "That one's true," Spider-Man countered as he danced backwards. "She didn't have as much time for you once she started coming over my house and baking cookies for me." It wasn't the most dignified thing he'd ever done, but he had to use whatever was available. Blood Spider was nuts, so he hit him where it seemed like it would hurt. It must have succeeded. Bingham screamed and came at him again, but this time, more sloppily. He was nothing but fury now. Spider-Man ducked under his blow and then came up hard, landing a sledgehammer of a punch into Bingham's chin. Blood Spider staggered back, but he looked to be steadying himself. Spider-Man moved in again and struck him in the jaw. Bingham stayed on his feet. He bunched his fists, ready to strike back, so Spider-Man hit him again. This time he didn't wait. He hit again, and then again, and then he stopped. This man had killed Anika, and Ramsey, and Andy, and so many others. But he wasn't a monster. Not like Fisk, who plotted his schemes and cared no more for the dead than he did for fallen pieces on a chessboard. Bingham was damaged. Anyone could see that. He needed to be locked up, not beaten to a pulp. Now was the time for the webs. A barrage aimed at Bingham's calves set him off balance. As he lurched in place, Spider-Man circled him. Wrapping him in a cocoon, even his advanced strength couldn't break. Bingham continued to waver, half-conscious. His eyes rolled in his head. "You're right," Spider-Man told him between panting breaths. "We're not the same. We're completely different." Bingham began to topple. The kind thing would have been to step in and ease his fall. Forget that. Spider-Man wasn't like Bingham, but he never claimed to be a saint. Blood Spider hit the floor. The web-slinger stood there, trying to figure out what to feel. There were so many people around him. He'd been vaguely aware before, but now he felt all those eyes. He felt the light of the TV cameras. It was time to run, but not yet. He needed to be still, just for a moment. He'd caught Anika's murderer. He hadn't killed him, destroyed him, or made him beg for mercy. He'd caught him. He'd taken on that responsibility, and he'd seen it through. Breathing hard, he looked up to face all those eyes. Then he felt the pain from the beating he'd taken. "Best not to say ow," he thought. "Might tarnish the image." Many of the guests had fled, but there were still plenty around, pressed on the sides of the ballroom, watching the excitement. Reporters were there, including MJ, who was grinning at him. Even Aunt May seemed pleased. It was nice that, over the years, she became a Spider-Man defender. Reporters snapped photos. Video cameras followed his every move. He watched as Yuri Watanabe talked down some of the police who still wanted to move in for an arrest. "Here's the fake Spider-Man," he told them. "This is the restaurant bomber. He should have some pretty interesting stories to tell you." "Arrest him!" Jameson shouted, pointing at Spider-Man. Then he was pointing to where the web-slinger had been. Spider-Man was gone.